In Season 1 of Manifest, the passengers aboard Montego Air Flight 828 depart from Jamaica in 2013, but upon their arrival in New York City, they discover that the date was now November 4th, 2018, and that they had somehow jumped forward over 5 years in time. And it's not just the time jump that the passengers have to worry about, as they each begin hearing voices guiding them for a specific mission. The NSA and its director Robert Vance begin to look into the truth behind the plane's disappearance and urges all of the passengers to not speak of their experience with anyone. And as for those passengers, the world presumed them dead, leading to a lot of complications upon their return. Michaela Stone was an NYPD detective engaged to fellow detective Jared before Flight 828. Upon her return, she discovers that Jared has married her best friend Lourdes. Despite this, Michaela and Jared begin to rekindle their romance, leading Jared to file for a divorce from Lourdes. Michaela's brother Ben was aboard Flight 828 with his young son Cal, who had recently been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Ben's wife Grace and their daughter Olive, Cal's twin, had been forced to board a separate flight out of Jamaica. During the 5-year absence, Grace began dating a man named Danny, whom Olive began to look up to as her new father figure. Grace breaks up with Danny to reconcile with Ben upon his return, but the relationship is now strained. Eventually, Grace reveals to Ben that she was pregnant, but that Danny was likely the father. Meanwhile, Cal struggles with his twin sister and all of his friends, now being 5 years older than him. Dr. Saanvi Bahl is a medical researcher aboard Flight 828 who returns home to discover that in the 5 years she was missing, her research has saved the lives of hundreds of pediatric cancer patients. This research could prove vital in saving Cal's life. Saanvi also begins researching the blood of the Flight 828 passengers, discovering they all have abnormalities in their blood, which are typically produced after having an ischemic stroke. The only passenger who doesn't hear the mysterious guiding voices is Cal Stone. Although he doesn't hear the voices, he still has other unique abilities that begin to manifest. One day, Cal develops a fever and begins speaking in Bulgarian, which Ben realizes must be connected to a Bulgarian Flight 828 passenger named Marco, who hadn't been seen since the plane's landing. Ben and Michaela discover a bus with 11 Flight 828 passengers, all foreign nationals with no next of kin, had gone missing. Ben confronts Vance about the missing passengers, believing the NSA to be involved, but Vance is just as alarmed by the news and offers his help on the investigation. Michaela and Jared discover that the missing passengers were taken by the mysterious company Unified Dynamic Systems, or UDS, to be experimented on. Ben takes a low-level job at UDS to infiltrate the company and discover their secrets. This leads him to Fiona Clark, a Flight 828 passenger who now worked for the mysterious UDS-led Singularity Project. Fiona helps Ben, Vance, Michaela, and Jared locate the Singularity Project's secret base, where the group engages in a shootout to save the missing passengers from the Singularity Project's experiments. The missing passengers are saved, but an accidental explosion kills Vance and seriously injures Jared. Meanwhile, Flight 828's pilot, Captain Bill Daly, has had his life ruined after taking most of the blame for the plane's disappearance. Looking to absolve his name and prove that a burst of gamma rays known as dark lightning was responsible for the mysterious event, Bill kidnaps Fiona due to her association with the Singularity Project and flies a stolen plane into another dark lightning storm. Bill and Fiona's plane disappears, although the Air National Guard claims it was shot down. Saanvi is taken hostage by a woman named Alice, who holds the doctor at gunpoint and forces her to try to save her cancer-stricken husband. Alice was a member of the Church of the Returned, who believed that the Flight 828 passengers could all perform miracles and wouldn't release Saanvi until her husband was healed. Ben and Michaela rescue Saanvi, who begins to suffer from PTSD. To manage her PTSD, Saanvi begins seeing a therapist. Unbeknownst to Saanvi, that therapist was secretly the Major, head of the Singularity Project. This video was made in partnership with NordVPN. Are you worried about finding a new show to watch after you're finished binging the final season of Manifest? With NordVPN, you can change your internet's virtual location and browse different Netflix libraries from different countries. Different regions have different streaming libraries. So if you switch your location to somewhere like the UK, you can watch shows like The Office, Friends, or Rick and Morty on Netflix without having to sign up for some other subscription streaming service. So stop paying for a dozen different streaming services and sign up for NordVPN. And the streaming thing is just the cherry on top of all of NordVPN's other great features. NordVPN also protects and encrypts your personal and private data, so you can go online with no risk of annoying ads, trackers, or malware. It's also the fastest VPN on the market, so you don't have to worry about internet speeds or throttling. If you sign up with my link, you can get protected for 2 years at only $2.88 a month, plus 4 free months. So sign up for my exclusive offer at nordvpn.com/chilltv for a great deal on your new plan. It's risk-free, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, link is in the description. Now let's get back to the video. Cal begins having visions urging him to a remote cabin to save a man caught in a blizzard. At the cabin, Cal, Ben, and Grace rescue a hiker named Zeke, who took shelter from the blizzard in a cave 2 weeks ago and came out to discover that a full year had passed. When Saanvi studies Zeke's blood, she discovers it has the same unique markers as the Flight 828 passengers. Meanwhile, Michaela is assigned to investigate a getaway van found in the East River 3 days after an armed robbery. When the van is pulled from the river, its driver, James Griffin, is still alive. When Saanvi investigates his blood, she realizes it has the same unique markers, meaning Griffin had jumped forward 3 days in time. Griffin begins hearing the mysterious callings, warning of a bomb threat in Midtown Manhattan. Griffin receives immunity for his various crimes in exchange for leading the authorities to the bomb so they could defuse it. Following his release from custody, Griffin plans on revealing his mysterious callings to the media. Michaela, Ben, Saanvi, and Zeke all hear their own calling to stop Griffin from speaking out. Zeke buys a gun to obey the calling and murder Griffin, but never gets the chance, as Griffin suddenly coughs up large amounts of water and drowns. Ben realizes that Griffin died 3 days after his return, the same amount of time he was gone. By this calculation, Ben theorizes that the Flight 828 passengers would all die on June 2nd, 2024, which Cal confirms he has seen in a vision. As the season comes to a close, Jared goes to Michaela's apartment to confront Zeke over his purchase of the gun to murder Griffin. The two engage in a fight, and right as Michaela enters her apartment, the gun accidentally goes off. In season 2 of Manifest, it's revealed that Michaela was struck by the stray bullet. She recovers from her wounds and forgives Zeke for the accident, even vouching for him to ensure he didn't face any criminal consequences. Michaela and Zeke then team up to continue obeying their callings, eventually falling in love and getting married. Jared begins to feel frustrated with Michaela and the Flight 828 passengers, using their callings as an excuse to disobey the law. He begins a relationship with a woman named Tamara, whose bar was frequented by Xers, a group who hate the Flight 828 survivors and wanted to see them all dead. Jared gets close to Tamara's brother Billy, a member of the Xers, and the Xers leader Simon White. As the police begin to investigate the Xers and thwart their increasingly violent methods, Jared is able to warn them and help them evade arrest. Michaela begins to suspect that Jared was involved with the Xers and plants a bug in Tamara's bar to obtain incriminating evidence. Jared then reveals to Michaela that he was actually working undercover to take down the Xers from the inside. The Xers kidnap Zeke and hold him captive at the bar, where their leader Simon orders Jared to kill him. Michaela's planted bug records the order, giving the police the evidence necessary to raid the bar and arrest Simon and his fellow Xers. Meanwhile, Grace starts receiving callings like the Flight 828 passengers. Ben deduces that he must be the actual father of her unborn baby, and that he had passed on his callings genetically. Grace eventually gives birth to a daughter, Eden. This leads Olive to feel resentful of being the only member of her family who did not have the calling. She begins attending the Church of the Returned, who grow increasingly staunch in their beliefs. Olive invites a college-aged 822 passenger named TJ to the church after he becomes upset over the fast-approaching 2024 death date. Olive and TJ make a discovery tracing the callings all the way back to ancient mariners who went mad while trying to rid themselves of their visions. Olive becomes disillusioned with the church as their beliefs become more staunch, leading to a member named Isaiah calling 828 passengers to a nightclub where he poisons everyone before locking them inside and setting the entire club on fire, in the hopes of proving that the passengers would miraculously survive. Although although Ben, Michaela, Zeke, and Jared manage to rescue several passengers, many others die in the club. Ben confronts the church's leader Adrian, a Flight 828 passenger, and admonishes him for what his beliefs have caused. Following the tragedy, TJ decides to travel to Egypt to continue his investigations of the calling's origins. Ben is also visited by Vance, who reveals that he faked his own death in order to better track the mysterious and villainous Major. Saanvi informs Ben and Vance that her research into the blood of those with the calling has led to some very interesting results. She believed that she was close to developing a way to give the calling to others, or cure it from those who already had it. As Zeke's death date approaches, his body begins to suffer from the frostbite he was supposed to die from in the blizzard. Saanvi assures him that she was close to developing a cure that would save his life, but Zeke remains concerned. Saanvi also realizes that her therapist was in fact the Major, who was stealing Saanvi's research for Project Singularity's own nefarious purposes. Saanvi poisons the Major and demands answers in exchange for an antidote, but when the women struggle over the antidote vial, it shatters, leading to the Major's death. Meanwhile, Michaela follows the guidance of her callings to raid a meth lab run by criminals Jace, Pete, and Corey. Following their arrest, the Meth Heads manage to escape their prison bus and take Cal hostage for revenge. Zeke has a calling that leads himself, Ben, and Michaela to a secluded cabin in the mountains. There, they chase the Meth Heads and Cal across a frozen lake. The ice breaks and the criminals and Cal fall into the freezing water. Zeke dives in and saves Cal, but then dies of hypothermia. Moments later, Zeke comes back to life, miraculously saved from hypothermia and his impending death date. Ben deduces that the only way for the Flight 828 passengers to avoid their own deaths was to obey their callings. When the police arrive at the lake, Jared is shocked that the bodies of Jace, Pete, and Corey are unable to be found. As the season comes to a close, Ben has a calling of Flight 828 exploding and crashing into the ocean. In that same ocean, a Cuban fisherman somehow recovers the tail fin of Flight 828. In Season 3 of Manifest, Ben and Vance head to Cuba to investigate the newly discovered tail fin. Vance rejoins the NSA and is placed in charge of Project Eureka, which seeks to reassemble the found wreckage of Flight 828 and uncover the truth behind its reappearance. Ben and Saanvi agree to assist in Project Eureka's research, and Ben even allows them to experiment on him. Ben eventually theorizes that Flight 828 did in fact crash on its way to New York, killing all of the passengers on board. For some reason, the passengers were then resurrected 5 years later with a purpose to fulfill. Meanwhile, Michaela and Zeke are on their honeymoon in Costa Rica when they receive callings to rescue a Flight 828 passenger named Angelina, who is currently being held captive by her highly religious parents after they claim she was being possessed. Upon rescuing Angelina, Michaela and Zeke take her to stay with Ben and Grace. Michaela and Zeke also decide to move in with and care for Beverly, the ailing mother of Michaela's late friend Evie. While caring for Beverly, Zeke begins to develop empathic abilities. While adjusting to her new life in the care of the Stone family, Angelina receives a calling and uncovers an old photo of herself as a child visiting the King Cone ice cream shop. Meanwhile, the Meth Heads return from the dead, having been resurrected from the frozen lake. While robbing the King Cone ice cream shop, Pete discovers Angelina's photo. Jace and Corey abandon Pete, who is then arrested by the police. Pete is taken to Project Eureka and experimented on, and he agrees to help the authorities catch Jace and Corey. Pete also meets Angelina, and the two believe the King Cone picture was proof that they were destined to find each other and fall in love. Meanwhile, Jace believed that Cal was responsible for the Meth Heads' original deaths, and their new death dates could be prevented if they murdered Cal. Grace takes Cal and goes into hiding with her estranged stepbrother Tariq. Pete and Corey both realize that Jace has gone too far and team up with Ben to race to stop him from killing Cal. Jace ambushes the Stone family, killing Tariq before Grace gets the upper hand and holds him at gunpoint. Ben convinces Grace not to shoot Jace, as his new death date was about to occur. As his time expires, Jace begins coughing up lake water and dies. Pete and Corey survive, which Ben credits to them doing the right thing and being spared. But then Olive realizes that an ancient drawing sent to her by TJ actually states that those resurrected together were also to be judged together. And so, a shadowy figure emerges from Jace's body and murders Pete and Corey. Ben then comes up with the lifeboat theory, theorizing that all of the Flight 828 passengers would need to stay morally in line, or risk being judged as one, sinking their lifeboat when their death date in 2024 arrived. Ben's newfound staunch belief in the lifeboat theory and strictly adhering to the callings begins to sow dissension amongst his fellow 828 passengers, including a passenger named Egan and Church of the Return founder Adrian. One of the immoral passengers is Saanvi, who allows her involvement in the Major's death to be covered up and kept secret. For her sins, Saanvi stops receiving callings and begins bleeding from her eyes. Saanvi also begins experimenting on a piece of ancient wood believed to be from Noah's Ark. These experiments cause an earthquake to strike New York City, exposing lava flowing underground. To fix all of the problems she has caused, Saanvi throws the wood into the lava, causing the ground to heal, and confesses to the Major's murder, which stops her eyes from bleeding. Speaking of the Major, her daughter Sarah begins dating Jared after coming to town to uncover the truth behind her mother's disappearance. During the earthquake, Angelina has a near-death experience and believes that baby Eden is somehow her guardian angel. To prove her theory, Angelina sets the stone house on fire. Grace catches her in the act, putting out the fire and kicking the unstable Angelina out of their home. Angelina, fervent in her beliefs, breaks back into the stone house, stabs Grace and leaves her for dead, and kidnaps baby Eden. Meanwhile, Cal begins to feel a connection to the Flight 828 tail fin and heads to the Eureka Labs to investigate it. Upon touching the tail fin, Cal disappears. Ben receives a calling to return the tail fin to the ocean, so he heads off with Saanvi and the Coast Guard to Cuba. Upon returning the tail fin to the ocean, Cal reappears in the stone house, suddenly 5 years older. He finds his mortally wounded mother and comforts her as she dies. As the season comes to a close, Eureka scientist Dr. Gupta is leaving the lab when the long-missing Captain Daly suddenly appears in the salvaged Flight 828 cockpit. But just as quickly as he appeared, he disappears again, along with the entire rest of the plane.